Hello, this is teacher Hernan. Today I'm here with teacher Luis Campuzano. We are going to talk about ICT in English as a second language. Luis, do you recommend information communication technologies as a strategy or a tool to teach English?
I think it's a must. It's a must because, nowadays, the younger population, that's what they're just wrapped up in outside of the classroom. They're constantly connected. And so we have to use that to our advantage. And as a teacher, it's so easy to just make that part of your homework, part of your in-class planning. Or you as the teacher take content that's relevant on the web, on social media, and bring it into the classroom. Not everything has to be grammar-based. Not everything has to be directed as something that has to be vocabulary or listening. Motivate people with what's happening, because that's what kids care about. Kids don't care about if they're learning about the present simple or yes or no questions, whatever. They care about what's going on in the world around them outside of the classroom. They're counting the minutes to leave the classroom, so let's take advantage of that. I tell my students to take advantage of TV programs, series. You can watch them in English, and if you can watch the series or movie in English and with subtitles in English, you're getting not only listening, but you're also reading. So you're getting all the input necessary to produce. So we should definitely use that to our advantage.
So what's the importance of translation then?
I think translation is not important. In fact, if you can avoid it, even better. Because I think when you translate, you're using your first language as a crutch. So we want to get to the point where the student has the necessity to learn the word and to think in English. It's very normal, and it's a reflex that we translate when we're learning because we want to know what's going on. But with time, people start to not translate. That's how babies learn. It took a baby 6 months to say mom or dad. But it's a question of being patient. I think a lot of people, they feed into the false advertising that you can learn English in a month, in 2 months. It doesn't work that way. You can better your language in certain aspects, but it takes time. It takes time. It's an ability, and it takes time.
And what's the importance of language one?
I think it's important when it's a true beginner. When it's a true beginner, I think if you as a teacher have the opportunity to use, the L1 in the classroom, then do it. But then again, as a teacher, you shouldn't use the first language as a crutch either. I would say when it's, just an emergency, then in that case, use it. And when the student is an A1, you have to take your time. Try to expose them as much as possible to vocabulary and listening that is to their level. It's a time-staking process.
How about Netflix as a resource to teach English?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the best things that's ever happened, along with YouTube, because that's what young people are into now. So we should use that to our advantage. If we could, as teachers, it'd be great to take a series, have students watch it. There's no way for us to really verify if they're watching it in English, but if you could watch it in the classroom, that'd be great. Put the subtitles in English, and then have discussion about it, have people write about it, and you could just do a whole bunch of activities with any series, any movie, and I think that motivates kids much more than a textbook reading about Bob in Ohio, in 1985.
Any recommendation for you about Netflix? Any series that you can suggest?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of series nowadays that are very short. I think if a student wants to learn, just general English, including informal English, and yeah, you can watch sitcoms. But I really recommend documentaries that are short, because documentaries tend to use a good level of vocabulary. It's a very neutral pronunciation. So there's a great one on Netflix called Explain This. And the episodes, range from 20 minutes to 30 minutes. They're very short. I think there's another one called Follow This. And those episodes are like 15 minutes long. So those are really good. Just documentary. I really recommend documentaries because of the level of language used. It's a good pace, neutral pronunciation.
And about doing a review about Follow Up. What is it about?
The Follow This, the show.
Oh yeah, Follow This.
Oh, Follow This. It'd be great if people could watch it. If you could show it in the classroom. Like I said, it's 15 minutes. And, for true beginners or people that, A2, B1, you could say, what did you understand from it? Now, when you take that, you could take that same content, and, use it with B2 learners, and have a real debate about what was going on. You could take any content and really mold it to what the student needs. It's all up to the creativity of the teacher.
How about songs, Luis?
I recommend pop songs. I know hip hop is huge around the world, but I think pop is good because it's a slow paced. The pronunciation again is more neutral. I think songs are great. You can't overuse a song, because in a song you have the verse, you have the chorus, and it's just repeating the same words. I think a song is good, to use for a limited amount of time, because you're limiting your vocabulary and what's being used in the song, which is just a short amount of words. You're not really exposing a student to a lot of vocabulary in one song. Use a combination of songs and have students compare tenses, compare the content. Like I said, once again, creativity is the key.
How about news?
News is fantastic. News is fantastic. It could be a little bit difficult for beginners, but news is good. Just as documentaries, news tends to use a good range of vocabulary. They're easier to understand than sitcoms, because they speak a little slower. But news are good. Nowadays, there's a lot of channels on YouTube that take trending topics and talk about them. The more the merrier. Whatever the student can, the more he can expose himself to the language, the better.
There has been a discussion on the desk about being native to teach English, and there are other questions like native of where, because English as a first language is in many countries. So what do you think about this? What accent is better to teach?
Ooh, it's hard, because it might sound discriminatory if I say that the British accent is better than the American. People have the preferences. I think that you should try to expose people to an accent that is neutral. I would say, Midwest U.S., the U.S., just like Colombia or any country, has a range of accents according to the region. I think native teachers, even if you're not native, it's all about how you plan the class and how much heart you put into teaching. And it's not really necessary to be native to be a good teacher. I think you have to have good planning. You have to motivate. You have to know your students and take it from there.
How about culture? It's, for example, you teach English in Colombia, and it happens a lot that in the institutions that teach languages, they use American culture or British culture to teach English. How about including Colombian culture instead of American culture? No matter if here they don't speak English as a first language, is that a good strategy? Maybe.
I think it's a great point. It's a great point because sometimes we focus too much on the vocabulary we have to teach and the tenses and things like that, but we don't focus on how, because it's a different culture, there are certain things that would be acceptable in one culture and not acceptable in the other. Americans tend to be a little colder than Colombians. Colombians are a little warmer. And I've talked to you about this, when we hang out personally. But I find it really ironic how here in Colombia they're very open to invite you to their house, have a cup of coffee with you, But if you don't cross the street fast enough, you can get killed by a car. Culture is important because there are some things that we consider normal here and we don't consider normal in another country. It would be frowned upon. Example of that, when I first came down here, as a culture shock when I saw people don't respect personal space, and especially when you're making a line, you see that people don't respect personal space, and I didn't understand the why behind it. And then I understood, if you leave too much space between you and the person in front of you, somebody will cut in right in front of you, and that's like, it's crazy how people do that. But things like that, little things like that. I think culture is important. And that's something that as a teacher you have to research, and you won't find that in a grammar book. You won't find that in regular teaching resources. That's something that you really have to. You probably get that from movies. You probably get that from maybe traveling to the place. That's the hardest component, I think, as a teacher, is to kind of attach the cultural aspect to the language. But it is important. I'll give you an example. Here, people say negrito, negrita as a word of love. It has a positive connotation because People do that because they care for each other. But even though the word negro is black and it's just a color for us, that word, you take that word, and in the United States it's negro, and it has a whole negative aspect of history that goes along with it from slavery times up to now. So you can't call your best friend, black. In the U.S., you can't say the word negro and black because it would be considered total disrespect, and because we don't have the culture attached to it. And that's something that's really interesting because, when you're learning a language, I see a lot of students, they want to learn the bad words first. Everybody wants to learn the bad words first. And people are they're just ready to use the bad word first. And they'll say it and they'll laugh. But the reason that they find it so funny, both English and Spanish, is because they don't have the emotional aspect attached to it. It's like an American saying a bad word that we use here in Colombia. When you don't have the emotional aspect attached to it, it really takes it out of context.
And one aspect, again, about culture that it makes it harder, I bet, is immersion. How to make immersion possible in a Spanish-speaking country?
It's a lot about detail and control. There are schools that use the immersion programs, and it's hard because to be truly immersed in all aspects of the school, in all places of school, it would have to be in English, all signs, etc. And that's a heavy undertaking to really make. Because at the end of the day, we are in a Spanish-speaking country. But if you could pull it off, even in 80%, it does make a big difference. Because again, it comes down to creating the necessity for the student to, okay, what does this sign mean? Is this the bathroom? Is what I'm reading on the menu, is that really what I think it is? Once you create the necessity, then it forces people to learn. And they say, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So necessity is super important.
At the beginning, you mentioned about grammar and about not being important as people think, although it has a percentage of importance. So what are your suggestions to teach grammar these days?
I think it's a misconception, not only in Colombia, but around the world. When we teach English, it's normal to have a grammar-based class. And I think when you do that, you're putting yourself in a cell, because grammar is just one aspect of the language, and as we all know, native speakers, they have no idea of the intricate details of grammar. And so what's the point of using grammar if you're going to forget it? I think personally, when I teach a class now, I will teach grammar, but if I see that it's an easy aspect or an easy thing to correct, I'll go over a grammar aspect, but I really focus my class on input. So I try to do as much reading as possible, as much listening as possible, and then I'll take it from there. But grammar, not too much. I think we have to change the concept that grammar is the focus, because it's not. Language is the focus, but language doesn't equal grammar.
How about contextualizing the class? Like giving them the context, and then at the end getting these parts of text and explain the grammar that derives.
I agree, because when you expose a student to, whether it be a song, an audio, a conversation, or a text first, you go over it with them. We have this innate need to learn. So if a student is interested, they'll want to kind of understand, what is this word in context? What does this mean? What does this say? It's good to expose the student and then use that as a model to, teach whatever it is you're going to, focus on, grammar, whatever. Then go over the topic, so to speak, and then have them go over the content again, whether it be audio, whether it be reading, and then they can tie it together from what you taught them to what they're seeing now.
Okay, Luis, any book that you can suggest to the audience?
I think some of it has to do with what kind of student you are. There's people that are very visual, and there's people that are not. For those people that are not visual, and maybe they're not really into reading for whatever reason, audiobooks I think are a good idea. They're kind of frowned upon by some people, but I think it's a good idea, because either way it's input. So books, that's a hard question. There's just so many good books out there. I think it's important to know your level when you're going to pick a book, because if you pick a text that's way above your level, it might discourage you. Try to look for a book that has a range of words that is adequate for you, and also a level of vocabulary. Believe it or not, I think children's books are fantastic for all ages because of the language that is used, the vocabularies that is used, and besides that, children's books always have a nice message. So all around, I think it's a good idea. Comic books also as well.
Remember, this is Teacher Hernan, Teacher Lucho. Today we talked about teaching methodologies, teaching resources.
English is very important. It doesn't matter what career you're studying or if you're not in the university. English gives you an advantage in today's world, and not only in the business world, in the academic world, but how nice is it to go to another country, to another place, and talk to somebody you don't know in English. Talk to people online in English. It's just another communication tool, and without communication, we're alone. So I think English is super important.
Recuerden, soy el profesor Hernán, el profesor Lucho. El día de hoy lo que hicimos fue una conversación en inglés, trabajando las metodologías de enseñanza, los recursos y haciendo nuevamente el envío del mensaje que ser nativo no es un requisito para enseñar o para hablar en inglés. Ya vieron ustedes, yo no soy nativo, él lo es, y pudimos tener una conversación, como decimos aquí en Colombia de manera coloquial, de tú a tú. Luis Eduardo, unas últimas palabras para la audiencia.
Pueden aprender a cualquier edad, no alimentemos ese paradigma que es muy tarde para aprender. Se trata de prioridades y si uno quiere, puede. Vamos a dejar una lista de recursos para todos ustedes que pueden utilizar. Categoricé unas páginas por habilidad y lo pueden utilizar.
Muchas gracias.